Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans, and today I have end times expert Jeff Kinley joining me to talk about his exciting new book about the return of Jesus. Also in the subscriber-only portion of the program today, I'm talking about Israel. Some amazing events that have happened in Israel. I'm going to talk about the Psalm 83 war and things that are happening in Iran, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza right now that are exactly parallel with the Psalm 83 war and the exciting things that are happening on the front related to Israel. I'm also talking about chest-feeding men who have gone through so-called transition, and now they're wanting to get be a part of La Leche, a women's breastfeeding group, and they want to learn how to chest feed. Talk about that in an amazing development in Canada of a city, a town being persecuted because they would not have Gay Pride Month. Unbelievable things that are happening around the world. I'm going to talk about that in the subscriber-only portion. Right now, I want to introduce my guest for today. Jeff Kinley has been a guest here before, and I'm delighted to welcome him back. He's a former pastor and best-selling author of 40 books. He's a recognized expert and thought leader in the field of Bible prophecy, having authored 12 books on the subject. And Jeff connects with this generation, engaging them with biblical truth in a fresh, practical way. He's here today to discuss his new book, The End of the World According to Jesus of Nazareth. Jeff, thank you for joining me today.
Jimmy, thank you so much. Always great to be with you, brother.
Well, you're such a great author of tons of books, but your end times books, you have just a really good way of connecting with people that are reading it and a good way of communicating about it. This book, The End of the World According to Jesus of Nazareth, interesting. It instantly had my attention because you're focusing this off the words of Jesus, especially you're starting with the Olivet Discourse. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And, typically end times books kind of go straight to either an overview of the chronology of the end times or maybe tackling the book of Revelation. And I've done books on that. But I was just really struck a couple of years ago, Jimmy, just by the profundity of Christ's words in Matthew 24. And it just so gripped my heart. There are things in your life that you can't let go of, that God just puts on your mind. You can't dismiss them. And it got to the point where I just said to my wife, I said, I think God wants me to go to Jerusalem. And I think he wants me to go to the Mount of Olives and sit there and see what Christ saw and to do research on this book, on the Olivet Discourse. And she said, just go do it. And so I did. I flew to Tel Aviv and went to Jerusalem on New Year's Eve here a year or so ago, and just spent, a great deal of time just doing the research, and because I wanted to feel that dirt underneath my feet as I wrote these words. So it was a great moving experience for me.
The Mount of Olives is beautiful. And it's such a, when you think about Israel, and I've been there a lot like you have, it's so mountainous, and the visuals are just spectacular. Yeah. So, Jeff, what is so important about the Olivet Discourse and Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse? Why is it so special?
Yeah, well, everything in Scripture is all about context, and Christ was a very intentional person. He obviously was the God-man. He was fully God, fully man. But this takes place in the last week of his life. In fact, it takes place on a Wednesday before the Thursday when he's arrested. And this is one of the longest sermons that Christ ever gives. It's obviously towards the end of his life. And so, we know that last words are lasting words. And so Jesus was responding to some questions his disciples were asking him on the Temple Mount when they were admiring the greatness of the temple and all the ornate structures and the offerings, the votive offerings that had been given there. And Jesus just burst their bubble, just says, hey, guys, it's all going to burn, basically. It's all this is coming down. And that really kind of struck them. And so they continued walking down the Kidron Valley and up to the Mount of Olives. And then Peter, James, John, and Andrew come to him and they say, okay, Lord, tell us, when are these things going to happen? And what's going to be the sign of your coming into the end of the age? And what's very interesting, Jimmy, is in the Matthew account, Jesus doesn't answer the first question about when's it going to happen, this temple coming down. In Luke, he does answer that question. But in Matthew, really the question, what's the sign of your coming? What's the end of the age? And of course, in their Jewish mind, that's the same event. That's the same thing. They're looking for Messiah, which will basically conclude the end of the present age and begin the kingdom age. And so Jesus just begins launching into this Olivet Discourse. And the thing that I find most interesting is that in verse 4, instead of just going right into the apocalypse, he answers and says to them, see to it that no one misleads you. And I find that interesting, Jimmy, because, when you talk about the end times, there's a lot of white noise out there, a lot of people that are, a lot of speculations, a lot of date setting, stuff like that. But Jesus said, guys, most of all, make sure that you get the truth, because otherwise you're going to be deceived.
Yeah, the deception is the devil's calling card, and the world today is full of deception. I was watching YouTube the other day, and I saw this one guy, and he's got a lot of followers, and he said the rapture's nowhere in the Bible. And so I just clicked in there, and smart guy, and he says, there's no scripture about the rapture, this kind of stuff. And, you talk about the end times. One of the reasons I like you, Jeff, and I like you on the show, and I like your writings, is you're very solid theologically. And I'm very careful on this show because I don't want people to be confused. Deception's bad, confusion's bad. Is that you get so confused, you think, I don't even know what it is, so I don't even care about it. Well, it's very important for us to understand, like you said, Matthew 24 and 25 is the Olivet Discourse. And it's one of the most important texts. It's a very long text, a very important text, that Jesus is telling us the future in advance. And not only that, he's talking about the generation that we're living in right now. So specifically, Jeff, so Jesus is responding to 4 of his disciples about the end of the age. Okay, what did he prophesy? What did he prophesy that lines up with the times we're living in?
Yeah, it's fascinating because he says in verse 6, well, he begins with deception, obviously, and there's obviously a lot of deception in the world today, so we can see that parallel. But in verse 6, he says, you'll be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See to it that you're not frightened, but these things must take place. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Various places there'll be famines and earthquakes. I mean, I can't think of a more parallel to our world than these words right here. And I think, Jimmy, when I study this passage specifically in its context, I think the ultimate fulfillment of these verses will take place during the tribulation period, during that Revelation 6 time when God is unleashing his actual judgments. But like in many prophecies that we see in the Bible, there's often a ramping up to the actual full fulfillment of the prophecy. And I call them Braxton Hicks contractions leading to the actual birth pangs because they're going to come. And I think God is giving us clues. I think what he's doing is, just like he says when he says later, it'll be like it was in the days of Noah, where we're seeing the precursors to that happen right now. So I think that right now God is flashing the neon sign, if you will, the check engine light, just saying, look, pay attention to this, because when this stuff hits in full force, the world's not going to be prepared for it.
What we're seeing right now, especially related to Israel, and you talk about, wars are going to be fought, wars and rumors of wars. And this is what I say to people. How many times have you heard the phrase World War III in the last year? Ukraine, Russia, you have Taiwan, and China, Iran, Israel, all these theaters of war right now that are heated up, and they're not cooling off. There's just this constant tension there. And something could happen very easily and trigger world war. And so you're talking about love will be scarce. One of the signs is people will be unloving. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And what happens is Jesus talks about lawlessness increasing. That's obviously something we're seeing in our time now. But in terms of the love going away, right now the church, the bride of Christ, I believe, is the restraining influence on much of the evil that's going to come in the last days. And we really represent the true love of God in the world. Think about that. We're the only people on the planet that truly love like God does. Other people can have, familial love and kind of that horizontal love, right, but people can't really express that agape, unconditional love in the same way that God does. And the church is a representative of that. Well, Jimmy, when we're taken out in the rapture, that's all gone. There's not a single person on this planet, not only that believes in Jesus, but also that is able to express that kind of love. So you combine that with the chaos, the confusion, the panic, the worldwide catastrophic impact this is going to have emotionally on people, then people are going to lose their minds. There's going to be looting and murder and rape and all sorts of abuse that's going to take place. And so, love will grow cold, and then they'll begin to turn, I believe, on the new baby Christians that'll come up during that time.
It's so frightening. Jesus said, they'll know you're my disciples if you have love for one another. Not if you're right.
Right.
Not if you have right doctrine, which is important, but it's because you have love for one another. And you talked about a ramping up, Jeff. You see this even among people who say they're Christians. There's just so much meanness and so much division and things like that. And like on social media as an example, everybody wants to be right. Everybody wants to go in there and be right, but they don't care about being loving. And so I believe when Jesus is saying that this is the only thing that's unique about Christianity, is that the love that we have is so unique. And Jesus said, because lawlessness has increased, most people's love will grow cold. Do you think that's related to the Antichrist, just related to the rejection of the Bible, or what?
I think initially it's related to an end times deception that Antichrist will bring in the early part of the tribulation period. And then in the last part of the tribulation period, 2 Thessalonians 2:8-10 tells us that God himself will send a delusion as well. And so it's Revelation 3:10 talks about this time period being a test on those who dwell upon the earth. God is essentially testing them, saying, look, I'm going to bring my anger, my judgments during this time. The test is, how are you going to respond to these judgments? And so, and for the most part, the world will fail the test, although there will be a great revival in the last days. So yeah, I think it does relate to Antichrist, to the times, the judgment, then eventually the delusion that God will send.
Well, Jesus talks about the abomination of desolation in Matthew 24, Daniel 9, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Revelation 13. And so there has to be a rebuilt temple. And so do you see anything? Obviously there's a lot happening. You were at the Mount of Olives. There's a lot happening related to the rebuilding of the temple. Now the temple doesn't have to be rebuilt for the rapture to happen, right?
Right. No, that's correct. Yeah, the rapture, I believe, is the next prophesied fulfillment in God's narrative of the end times.
Yeah, and then sometime during the first 3.5 years, there's going to be a rebuilt temple.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be there because the abomination of desolation that Christ talks about, that Paul talks about in 2 Thessalonians, can only happen if there's a rebuilt temple. And so we know there's going to be a temple on the Temple Mount. And what's very interesting is that, you've got the Temple Institute there, right there in Jerusalem.
Absolutely.
that is intentional about, they've got the plans, they've trained the priests, they've made sacrificial offerings, everything. They're ready to go. All they need is a piece of real estate. And something has got to happen to free up that piece of real estate, either through the war of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38-39, or the peace treaty of Antichrist, or some combination of those two events kind of coming together, has got to make that possible. And Jimmy, it's an interesting point you make, because you and I both probably receive a lot of negativity from people who say, well, quit talking about Israel. Why do you talk about Israel all the time? Well, listen, Israel is the key. Israel really is the Rosetta Stone for the end times. And many of the prophecies, in fact, most of the prophecies that we read about in Revelation, in the tribulation, can't take place unless Israel's in the land, unless there's that rebuilt temple. So we're seeing the infrastructure, kind of the stage being set right now like a play for these things to take place. And the temple and Israel are integral pieces to that puzzle.
In Revelation 11, it talks about the two witnesses, and they're basically bulletproof. In the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, they can do anything they want. Nobody can touch them. They can call down plagues on the earth and all that stuff. And one of the things that I say is, really, when they show up, it doesn't matter whether the Antichrist has allowed them to rebuild the temple or whatever. When the two witnesses show up, they just say, guys, rebuild the temple, we'll take care of you. And so the temple is going to be rebuilt during that period of time. The other interesting thing to me, Jeff, is in Revelation 11, it says the Antichrist, for the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, the Antichrist is kind of political, rising to power. In the middle of the tribulation is when he kills the two witnesses. He commits the abomination of desolation. And at that point, he then is the ruler of the world during that period of time. The Great Tribulation is what Jesus calls it there. And so the interesting thing to me is it says that the Antichrist kills the two witnesses and their bodies are laid in the streets of Jerusalem. And it says the inhabitants of the earth gloat over them in real time. It's a 3.5-day event. We're the first generation in human history. 6.92 billion people on earth have a smartphone, not a cell phone. They have a smartphone for the first time. Because there was a preacher in the 1920s in Texas, and he said Jesus can't come again until the temple is rebuilt, until Israel's a nation, and until everybody can watch the same thing at the same time. So we're the first generation in the history of the world has the technology that when the two witnesses are killed, we can watch. Everybody can gloat over the two witnesses on their personal viewing device, their smartphone.
No, it's absolutely
It's
right.
amazing.
It is amazing, and what's interesting about that, if you trace the humanity and their perspective and their attitude towards God from the beginning of the tribulation to that midpoint, things begin to change dramatically. They go from being afraid of God to refusing to repent of their sins to now they start blaspheming God. And it says in that Revelation 11 passage there, Jimmy, it says that they send gifts to one another to celebrate the death of these two witnesses. So they've joined now Antichrist in his hatred for God and for the two witnesses. I call it Happy Dead Preacher's Day. They're just going to send all these gifts, to people because of that. And so what happens is God says, all right, but you're not going to get the last word, because as we know, the Bible goes on to say that after three days, their bodies, they stand up, they sit up, and they are raptured up to heaven in sight of all, and there's a great earthquake. So God has his vengeance on the two witnesses. But yeah, it's a time of continued, I call it devolution of the human race to the point where they actually blaspheme God.
Revelation 16, the bowl judgments, the most horrific of all judgments, and they curse God, won't repent.
Yeah.
So when are these things going to take place, Jeff? Do we have an idea, because you say the Jewish people are preserved. One of the things that Jesus talked about that.
Yeah, so one of the purposes of the tribulation, it's called the 70th week of Daniel. It's a time where God is not only sending wrath upon the earth, but he's using these events to try to woo and to romance back the nation of Israel, which we know Romans 11:25-26 says all Israel will be saved as a remnant of Israel there. And so one of the purposes is to really bring Israel back to God and for all Israel to be saved. And so I think that's one of the purposes of the two witnesses. It's one of the purposes of the 144,000 during that time. And I think, too, as it says in Daniel, that I think that they're going to go back to the Word of God. They're going to search out these things and find out, wow, God says something about the times in which we're living. We need Messiah. Here comes Antichrist in Revelation 12, sending a series of Holocaust-like persecution attempts on the Jewish people again. And then finally, in the end, they call out on the name of the Lord as Jesus said they would, Zechariah said they would, and here comes Messiah in Revelation 19 of the second coming.
Well, it's the good news at the very end for the Jewish people, that they're all saved in one day. Now, you talk about, in Matthew 24, Jesus talked about the days of Noah. What's the significance of that?
Yeah, I think there are two things. I think there's kind of a surface level, and then if you do sort of a deep dive, there's a whole another cavern to this thing. I think the first is just the fact that people are going to be completely unaware of God's return and God's ultimate judgment, just like they were in the days of Noah. They were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying and giving in marriage. And there's some people who interpret that as, goes back to the Genesis 6 and the whole marriage with the fallen sons of God and that type of thing. But I think that if you examine the days of Noah, what we find out is that there was rampant godlessness, there was unrestrained sexual immorality, there was really an apostasy during that day as well. And there was a remnant that was left behind. And so I think we're going to see that as well. The days of Noah, we're going to continue to see. It's going to come out of that lawlessness, I think, Jimmy, that unrestrained sexual immorality. And that's one of the sins that God talks about that they refuse to repent of. They go into demon worship during the time of tribulation. So I think as we look at the world around us, I call it Mardi Gras on steroids. It's just like, wow, no one's obeying God. Everyone doing what is right in their own eyes. So there's not going to be a restraining influence for sin. People are going to continue just to live this debauchery, this depraved nature kind of life. And so that's going to mark, I think, this end times generation.
Well, in Luke 17, Jesus talks about the days of Noah and the days of Lot. In Matthew 24, and this is important for people to understand, Jesus talks about two raptures, basically. He said, immediately following the tribulation of those days, the sun will be dark and the moon won't give its light. And then I'm going to send the angels to gather the elect from the four corners of the earth. He says immediately after the tribulation of those days. And then several verses later, he says, and as it was in the days of Noah before the flood, the days of the coming of man will be like the days of Noah before the flood. They were buying, selling, marrying, and giving in marriage. And so concerning the timing of the rapture, I know that you're pre-trib. You believe that Jesus comes before the tribulation. Okay. And so the days of Noah, it says that before the flood, when Noah got on the boat in Luke 17, Jesus said, the coming of the days of the Son of Man will be like the day that Noah got on the ark. Well, he didn't say a day or a season. He said the day, one specific day. On that day, judgment had not come. When Noah and his family got on the ark, the rain hadn't come. People were mocking and scoffing in the world, buying and selling, marrying. Buying and selling, marrying, giving in marriage talks about hope for the future. You're looking and saying, I'm buying, I'm selling, I'm marrying because I have hope for my future. At the end of the tribulation, there's no hope for the future. The world has just been decimated. And it says, related to Lot, Jesus said, the coming of the Son of Man will be like the day that Lot went out of Sodom and Gomorrah. Before the judgment came, he went out, then the judgment came. It said there's planting and building. He said that related to Lot. So the days of Noah, there's this rampant violence, rampant ungodliness, business as usual, the devil may care attitude, a remnant of righteous people, but in one judgment, one single day, both in the flood began and also the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. So what we're seeing now, Jeff, because you said the next major prophetic event is the rapture, which I totally agree with. Like with Lot in Noah, they were righteous men living in an unrighteous generation. They were rewarded, and cataclysmic judgment came upon the world. That's about what's happened, right?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I think what we're going to see is continued immorality, continued sin, like a tsunami of sin, continue to come on the earth in these last days that we're living in, which, Jimmy, I think is a clarion call for believers to stand up and be salt and light, even more so. And to be honest with you, you don't have to really be too radical to do that these days. You just simply have to be a godly person, and you distinguish yourselves from everybody else. But I think that's what's going to happen. We're going to continue to see the world get more rotten, but God's going to continue to raise up this remnant of this beautiful bride of His to be that salt and light, and to send out, as you said, the hope of the gospel in times, and pray that God would use these times to help people see how dark things are, how volatile things are in the world, and really how hopeless their own lives are.
How should believers prepare, Jeff, and I really want to encourage people to get your book, The End of the World, According to Jesus of Nazareth. And what I love about this is you're just teaching on the Olivet Discourse. And it's just a wonderful teaching that people can understand Matthew 24, 25, the Olivet Discourse. How do you prepare? How does the average person out there prepare for the return of Jesus?
Well, I think for us as believers, it's clear we need to be very wise stewards of the resources God has given to us. Everything from our gifts, our talents, our time, our treasure, everything. That little tiny dash between birth and death is going to go real quick, whether it's by the rapture or whether it's by death. So we need to be great stewards because we're living in a parenthesis of time. It's a very narrow, open door that we have to make an impact. So that's number one. I think for someone who may be listening is wondering about their eternal destiny is to say, look, there is coming a day of great judgment, of great fury that God is going to unleash upon this planet. And the rapture is your escape clause. The rapture is your ark. The door is open right now.
That's
Grace
right.
is abundantly available. And so I urge people, before the heart gets more hard, before the times get more dark, to give your life to Jesus Christ and believe upon Him, and you will be saved from the wrath that's to come.
Amen. Jeff, how can people get more information about your ministry?
Yeah, just go to jeffkinley.com, and all the things about my ministry you can find out there.
And you've got a couple of podcasts every week, don't you?
Yeah, I do the Prophecy Pros podcast, the Vintage Truth podcast, and then also do the King is Coming television program that Dr. Ed Heinsohn used to pastor.
Wonderful. And all that's on your website?
Yes.
The End of the World, According to Jesus of Nazareth by Jeff Kinley. And so, Jeff, thank you so much for being with me today. I hope people go and get your book on Amazon, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff, thank you so much for joining me today. Incredible book, The End of the World, According to Jesus of Nazareth. And this is so easy to understand, and obviously Christ-centered for people at any time, but especially now during the holidays. Encourage people to get this book. I also want to encourage you, stay tuned for the subscriber-only portion. I'm talking about what's happening in Israel being the fulfillment of the Psalm 83 war. I believe that's what we're seeing right now. And I'm going to read you a portion of the book by Bill Salus, and he's kind of my go-to expert on this, talking about these nations, who these nations are. And I'm going to read you some stories from the news of some amazing things that are happening right now in the Middle East, and good news related to Israel and things that are to come. Also talking about chest feeding, about these trans men who want to join La Leche, this women's breastfeeding group, and chest feeding, and just the joke that is. Also in Canada, a township being literally fined for not celebrating Pride Week, and talking about some of those things. And this is a caution for America. I want you to stay tuned. If you're not a subscriber to endtimes.com, go to endtimes.com. $7 a month, $77 a year. We would love to have you as a subscriber. And you not only get the whole Tipping Point show, you get everything that we do, all of our podcasts, all week long, all of our articles, tremendous information that we want to bless you with. Let me encourage you in this Christmas season to consider giving a gift subscription to endtimes.com to someone on your gift list. You can give them 1 month for $7, or you can give them 1 year for $77. It's a great gift, this information that we have here to encourage people, to equip people for the times that we're living in. Just remember that during the holiday season. And also, I know some of you, and on the comments portion, of our post, some people say, yeah, I sent this to all my friends. So thank you for this. I sent it to all my friends. Well, that's great. We want to bless people. But can I encourage you to tell your friends about endtimes.com and encourage them to also have their own subscription, because that's how we support this ministry. That's how we keep going forward. So tell somebody. You're our best advertising. If you're blessed by this ministry, tell somebody about it. Encourage them to become a subscriber, and also some to give. Some people don't subscribe, but they give to the ministry. Some people subscribe and they also give. You can go to endtimes.com right now and just go to donate and give a one-time gift or give a recurring gift. It's a tremendous blessing to us. 2025 is a growth year. Everything that we've done in this ministry to grow, we've done virally for the last 4 years. We started 4 years ago. And all the growth we've had, which has been incredible, has been completely viral. Next year, we're doing everything we can possibly do to grow this ministry and to tell people that Jesus is coming. Would you help us do that? I want to thank you for all those of you who are already given. It's a huge blessing to us. But just remember, tell your friends about us. Encourage you to buy a gift subscription for them or someone you love, but also go and give to endtimes.com. Right now, we're going to go to the subscriber-only portion. Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans. I'm joined today by Dr. Mark Hitchcock, who is a contributor here on endtimes.com. He has his own podcast, Marking the End Times. We're talking about what's happening right now in Israel, the things that are in the news right now, and where is all of this headed. We're also going to be answering questions in the subscriber-only portion. We're talking about the end times, the tribulation, Israel, all of the things, the rapture, some very important information. So we want you to stay tuned. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. There's a subscribe button right there. Subscribe to this channel and also like this channel. When you subscribe, it just means you get everything that comes out from us. It also, when you like it, it means that other people find out about it and you're helping somebody else. Also, just want to remind you, at give.endtimes.com, you can give to this ministry. If we've been a blessing to you, if we've touched you in some way and this is meaningful to you, go to give.endtimes.com. You can give a one-time gift. No gift is too small. No gift is too large. Also, you can make a recurring gift and help us build this ministry and help this message keep coming back to you and many others. And endtimes.com now, if you haven't subscribed there, go to endtimes.com and subscribe for $7 a month, because we have podcasts, we have articles, we have all types of important information on there all week long to bless you, to encourage you, and to keep you informed on what's taking place. Stay tuned for today's program. It's going to be powerful. Well, I'm joined today by Dr. Mark Hitchcock. He is the senior pastor of Faith Bible Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. He's also a regular contributor here. He's written over 30 books on the end times, and he has his own podcast called Marking the End Times here on endtimes.com. He's a part of our conferences, everything that we do. And we're talking today about what's happening in Israel, the headlines that are happening in Israel. We'll also be answering questions from our subscribers. Mark, thank you for joining me today.
Great to be with you again, as always.
We have this new book that we have just written together. It's called What's Next? The Israel-Gaza War, Connecting Today's Headlines for Tomorrow's Prophetic Events. And so this book, it was actually held up a couple of weeks by Amazon, but we talk in here about kind of the past, and you've done some podcasts recently on where Israel came from. In other words, is this actually their land, or are they occupiers, as people are saying? We talk about that in here. We talk about what's happening right now. We also talk about the prophetic implications of what's happening. What's happening in Israel right now is on a scale from 1 to 10, just in my mind prophetically, this is a 10. This is
Yeah.
something that is unprecedented in world history. This level of anti-Semitism. Do you believe that?
Sure. I mean, it's since the Holocaust. I mean, obviously the Holocaust was a concentration of anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany, but now we're seeing it globally.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the difference now. I mean, the world didn't really know what was going on in Germany. Finally, when these, the concentration camps were freed, people realized the horror that had been going on in Germany and also in Poland and other places. But it's global now. You have 100,000 people in Paris, 200,000 people in London. I mean, they're just coming out and just filling the streets and just filled with venomous hatred for the Jewish people. It's something that you could never even imagine. And if it happens to any other group of people, it's immediately decried, justifiably. But when it happens to the Jewish people, it's just there's not a counterbalance or outcry against it. I know there's some things happening in our country, some pro-Israel marches that are taking place as well, but they're nothing on the scale of the pro-Palestinian, the anti-Semitic rallies that are happening all around the world.
Well, the amazing thing, and I don't know why we should be amazed, but Bible prophecy says that the final scene of this age is the whole world marching against Israel. Zechariah 12, other places in the Bible where it says that they've all marched against Israel. So we see today that type of hatred toward the Jews there's already a war going on, but it could become at some point, it will become at some point, an international effort to come and take Jerusalem away from the Jews. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, all of these prophecies in the end times really have to do with Israel, with the world hating Israel. You have the Ezekiel 38-39 war, where this Russian-Iranian coalition, they come into the land of Israel, they come against the Jews. God delivers them. You have the Zechariah 12. You have Joel chapter 3. God's going to gather the nations to the valley of Jehoshaphat. The valley of decision. That's the Kidron Valley, right next to right on the east side of Jerusalem. So that's the center point in all the world. And what we see today is it's the center point in the world today. I mean, it's the focal point. It's the bullseye. It's ground zero. Whatever metaphor you want to use. And to see it happening today, we've all known, this is going to happen in the end, before Jesus comes back. But to see it it's just suddenly mushroomed before our eyes, really everywhere in the world. It's really, even for those of us who believed it was going to happen and knew it was going to happen, I still think it's shocking.
It's shocking. Yeah. October 7th was the match that lit the gasoline that we didn't know how much gasoline was out there, but it's worldwide. So we're going to talk about some articles, some things that are happening in the news right now. This is from Prophecy Newswatch, and the headline says, "Is worldwide Jew hatred setting the stage for the tribulation period?" Let me just read just a few paragraphs here. It says, "Aside from the spiritual paradigm with which Christians view and stand with Israel, most rational people, even unbelievers, would have a sense that sympathizing with Hamas right now is akin to endorsing the kidnap, torture, rape, beheading, and murder of Jews. People who thought that the horrors of the Holocaust were long behind them have suddenly been shaken by a terrifying sense of foreboding as people the world over call for the annihilation of the Jews once again. In the early stages of Hitler's plan to exterminate the Jews, perhaps ordinary people in far-off nations would have pleaded ignorance to the Jewish plight on the basis that the news didn't reach them. However, this time around, the evidence of Jew hatred is there for all to see, since anti-Semites cannot resist posting their abhorrent material online." And so the question that this article is bringing up is the worldwide Jew hatred setting up the tribulation? And what I believe, Mark, and I want to get your take on this. The answer is yes. The answer is we're at the end. We don't know how many days or weeks or months or years we have, but there's no doubt about the fact that these are the birth pains that Jesus talked about. The distress of nations, wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, pestilence, famines, all those things. We're seeing the intensity of this happening. So the Antichrist, before the tribulation, around the time of the rapture, there's going to be this answer man, the rider on the white horse of Revelation 6. Mm-hmm. And he's going to come in, according to Daniel 9, and he is going to confirm a 7-year covenant with Israel. And so when I think the Psalm 83 war, the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, Jeremiah 49, all of those things, those could happen any time. I mean, the stage is set for that. But at some point, the Antichrist is going to arrive on the scene and solve the problem. What do you think about, do you think the Antichrist is around right now? You think that he could show up sometime soon?
Well, yes. I mean, if the Lord's coming's in the next 30, 40, 50 years or so, he has to be alive somewhere, because he's not going to be a teenager when he takes power. He's going to, probably even in his 20s, he'll probably at least be 30s, 40s, 50s, somewhere in that range. So, and you look at our world today. I mean, how much longer can the lid be on the cauldron? I mean, it can't stay on very much longer. So I mean, no one can say, oh, yeah, for sure the Antichrist is alive today. But by everything that we can see today, we'd have to believe the Antichrist is alive somewhere on the earth today, lurking in the shadows. And it's fascinating. He's gonna come under the world as a friend of the Jewish people. Right. He's going to look like their friend. He's going to come on this platform of peace, and he's going to be the Time Man of the Year. He'll probably win the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, he's going to be hailed as this person who's finally able to solve this problem over this Gordian knot that no one's been able to solve. But at the midpoint of the tribulation, and the greatest double cross of all time, he's going to turn against the Jewish people. So this iron fist that's going to be inside this velvet glove is going to come out. And he'll be the ultimate anti-Semite that the world has ever seen. He'll be, totally inspired and totally energized by Satan, probably indwelled by Satan. So he'll be, Hitler plus. And it's going to be the worst time for the Jewish people. What we see today, the Bible says that, 2/3 of the Jewish people are going to be cut off during the tribulation period. That's a stunning, there's almost 15 million Jews. That's 10 million. That's more than the Holocaust. Right. And people think, well, how could that ever happen again? Well, you look at our world today and just this global hatred for the Jewish people that's taken place. We can see how it will happen, and how the Antichrist, as a person coming up in this whole situation now, will lead the world in this anti-Semitism. It's interesting that, I don't know if a lot of people have read the Hamas charter. But I read it last night, the Hamas covenant. It's these 36 articles. It was written in like 1988. That is the worst thing I've ever read in my entire life. Wow. It's the most virulent anti-Semitic. It's filled with conspiracy theories. There can be no negotiation with the Jewish people. Right. I mean, it's the most categorically I've read Mein Kampf. It's way worse than Mein Kampf. Wow. And by the way, recently, there's an article that says that Israeli soldiers have discovered copies of Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, in a children's room that was used by Hamas. So they've been discovering copies of Mein Kampf there in Palestine, which, again, it all comes from the same thing. It's fascinating. The Hamas was incubated back in the Muslim Brotherhood, which was founded in 1928. And one person I read this week said it arose in the same intellectual firmament as German Nazism and Italian fascism. Oh, wow. So it came about, the Muslim Brotherhood, at the same time. It's kind of incubated in this same period of time, in this anti-Semitism that we see in our world today that's increasing. But back then, you had anti-Semitism, kind of most of the world stood against it. And today we just see it, it's something that's hard to believe, but it's obviously a clear setup for what's coming. Yep, absolutely. So this is, you're talking about anti-Semitism. Children are being indoctrinated in this, and of course we see it on the university campuses. But this is an article, Prophecy News Watch. It says, parents, do you know what your kids believe about Israel? And it says, global TikTok post for the Israel-Hamas war. So this is TikTok, and the source of this is Axios. Stand with Palestine has 210,000 posts. Stand with Israel has 17,000 posts. And it says here, according to a Harvard-Harris poll, 51% of Americans aged 18 to 24 believe Hamas was justified in its brutal terrorist attack on innocent Israeli citizens on October 7th. What about those under the age of 18? What do they think about Israel? A recent article in the Jerusalem Post explained that around 6 individuals, some associated with Hamas and collectively boasting more than 100 million social media followers, have been waging a propaganda campaign against Israel on various social media platforms
since the start of the Swords of Iron War of October 7th. And it goes on here to talk about TikTok and how TikTok is influencing young people, but the majority of young people today side with Hamas and believe that their attack was justified. That's very troubling.
Well, it is, but I think it all of that comes from this whole paradigm that people are being taught today. Young people are being taught against, the oppressed and the oppressor. And if you can convince somebody that someone is an oppressor, then everything they do is bad. And if someone's oppressed, then everything they do is good. And so the whole world has been kind of framed in this light. And Israel has been an oppressed people from their beginning.
That's right.
With Abraham. Yeah. They're oppressed in Egypt. They've been, the pogroms against them with Haman and Antiochus Epiphanes and with Adolf Hitler. I mean, it's been one pogrom and persecution after another. And again, it's all energized by Satan, who's the ultimate anti-Semite, who doesn't want God's promises with Israel to be fulfilled.
That's right.
But it comes out of that whole milieu of this oppressed oppressor. And, the Jews came in 1948. Most of the land that they have, they purchased.
That's right.
They purchased the land. They were attacked simultaneously by 5 Arab nations. And the people who were living there, many of them fled. They left. Well, the Jews didn't let them come back because, they don't know what these people's intentions were. And it's all, that Israel came in and just stole their land. They bought most of it. People fled. They took the land there. Certainly the Jewish people aren't perfect. I mean, the Jewish nation isn't perfect. No one would say that. But it's all coming from these young people today, from their mindset of this oppressor viewpoint. And so they're going to immediately, jump to the conclusion to be on the side, but to be on Hamas side, but to say that the attack that happened on October 7th was justified, that's a level of brutality and acceptance of that, and really glorifying that I don't think we've ever seen before. And that's troubling because that's this younger generation.
Yeah, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, came out 2 weeks ago and said that it was justified. He said that because of the oppression of Israel, that it was no wonder that Hamas acted the way that they did against their oppression. Mm-hmm. So again, this is the young people. It's a lot of the university. And I said this, I was bringing a message a couple of weekends ago, and I made this statement. I think that parents and taxpayers in the United States need to think through how long we're going to send our children and our grandchildren to universities to learn to hate God, hate America, and hate Israel, because they're being indoctrinated in many cases.
Yes.
And if they come against these professors, they pay a price for it. And so this is a troubling thing. I think you have another article there, Mark.
Yes, I got an article. There's an interesting one that says there'll never be a better time for Israel to strike in Iran. That's a fascinating topic, because what many are saying right now is, Iran has been kind of getting off the hook. They're just using Absolutely. These proxies, they're surrogates for 20 years. They've been just letting other people do their dirty work. And so that's an article in Haaretz. It's an opinion piece, but saying that Iran is going to have to pay the price themselves for what they're doing. And, you can attack Hamas, you can attack Hezbollah, you can attack the Houthis down in Yemen, all these different, but sooner or later, Iran has to pay the price. And so it's being said, this is the time for Israel to strike Iran and hit Iran and make Iran pay the price. Now, we all know if that were to take place, it would set, the dominoes would begin to fall. But, it may be that Israel will do that here at some point in time, and the United States as well, because we've had, last count I have, it goes up every day, 52 attacks against our bases in Iraq and Syria. And eventually we're going to have to go and hit the source of this, not these pinprick attacks from these small proxy groups through there. So, if that takes place, that can also be a major lighting of the fuse for the God war. If Israel or the United States or both do something directly against Iran, that would be a major escalation of this. But here again, we have this article. This is the best time for Israel right now to do this, to while they're at it, to just kind of go ahead and eliminate these enemies. Hamas, Hezbollah would be next, and even take action against Iran. So. Now, that's very possible that could happen, I think, in the not too distant future.
Well, the United States has massive military assets in the Persian Gulf, in the Mediterranean. We have bases in Saudi Arabia, bases in Iraq. We've got a lot of capability. And what I have thought is the United States, I believe, could possibly strike Iran to take that responsibility off of Israel and put it on us. We have enough justification to bomb Iran. Number one, just to keep them from becoming a nuclear power, because they're just about to become. But in southern Iran, which is Elam, Jeremiah 49 prophesies the destruction of Elam. And it seems as though if that could be a fulfillment, if the United States and or Israel would strike Elam, that could be a fulfillment of Jeremiah 49. But I totally agree with you. I agree with two things. Iran is the head of the serpent. You can dance with the snake all you want to. The head of the serpent is Iran. And you're not going to deal with it decisively until you deal with them. But the other thing is, this is a good time to strike Iran, because you take away their momentum, because they've done a masterful job of creating all of these proxies all around Israel to now be a real major threat to them. If they, especially Hezbollah right now, if Hezbollah enters into the fray, and they've been escalating their attacks, Hezbollah has a tremendous amount of military power.
It's been called this network of proxies. They've been called the axis of resistance, that are coming against Israel, and of course the United States. And Israel's been called by them the little Satan. The United States is the great Satan. And in the United States, we need to be on alert, because as many people have been warning here lately, we're next. Right. They want to get Israel, but we're next. I mean, we're the great Satan that has to be eliminated. What's fascinating to me is Joel Rosenberg. Some years ago, I heard him make a statement. I've never forgotten it. He referred to Iran, the mullah leadership there, not all the people of Iran, but their mullah regime that runs the country, as an apocalyptic genocidal death cult.
Wow.
Now that's a lot stated there, but an apocalyptic genocidal death cult. You're hearing a lot about genocide, but they want to wipe Israel off the map. In fact, years ago when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was the president of Iran, he said they wanted to wipe Israel off the map, and someone said, "Well, that's good. At least he's recognizing they're on the map," because they don't normally have them on their map. But what we sometimes forget in all of this too with Iran, there's an apocalyptic element all of this with Iran. Iran, they're 12er Shiites. They believe that their Mahdi will return someday in a time of great chaos and warfare. But they believe that Jerusalem has to be taken, and that Israel has to be eliminated before their Mahdi can return. So there's an entire apocalyptic element to all of this that I think many people in the West who just see this as a kind of a political or a military war don't see this element to that, and they believe that they can hasten and accelerate the coming of their Mahdi by destroying Israel and capturing Jerusalem. So that whole idea of it's a genocidal death cult, but this apocalyptic element's there, and it's throughout all of Iran's actions. And I think we need to take that into account. This is part of their setup for their view of the end times, which they believe they can bring to pass.
Yeah, they are motivated by something greater than a military problem or a political problem. They have a religious conviction that they have to destroy Israel. Now, there was a summit this past week in Saudi Arabia, and unusually, Iranian president, it was Ibrahim Raisi, he was there, and he called, this is from Jewish News Syndicate, Iranian president calls to eliminate Jewish state. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi called on Saturday for the creation of a Palestinian state from the river to the sea, a genocidal rallying cry necessitating the destruction of Israel. The Jewish state is bordered by the Jordan River on the east and the Mediterranean Sea to the west. Raisi made the threat in Saudi Arabia at a summit of Arab and Muslim leaders on Israel's war against the Hamas terror group. And this is quoting him now. The only solution for this conflict is the resistance continuing against the Israeli oppression until the establishment of a Palestinian state from the river to the sea. Raisi also called for the West to sanction and boycott the Jewish state, for charges to be leveled against Israel and the United States at the International Criminal Court, and for inspections of the Jewish state's nuclear facilities. So this is, he wants Israel to, he's just coming out openly and saying it. And again, Mark, this is the power behind all the proxies that are causing the immediate problems for Israel. They want Israel destroyed. And so this is in
Right.
this is in the headlines. So this is why I'm saying at the beginning, I just don't see this getting better. Now, until the Antichrist shows up. I think this is a cauldron that is going to sit there and stew. I do believe at some point in time, Ezekiel 38 and 39, Psalm 83. And by the way, Psalm 83, and I've got my Bible open here, Psalm 83, in my Bible, under Psalm 83, it says, prayer to frustrate conspiracy against Israel. That's the heading of the chapter. It's a psalm of Asaph, and it says, do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make a tumult. Those who hate you have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people and have consulted together against your sheltered ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel be remembered no more. And it then goes on to list the nations doing it, and it's all the nations directly around them. But it says here, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, and the inhabitants of Tyre, that is the Gaza. Assyria is also joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot. So what we're seeing right now is a conspiracy. It's a coalition of nations saying, let's destroy Israel. Let's cut them off from being a nation. That's what Iran is saying. That's what their proxies are saying. This isn't just a war to get land. This is an effort to destroy the nation of Israel. That is Psalm 83. So whether we're seeing the beginning of Psalm 83 or whatever, this is a conspiracy to destroy the nation of Israel completely.
Well, that's right. Iran believes in their Shia apocalyptic view that they believe that Israel has to be taken and Jews worldwide have to be destroyed. And that's why all this talk of a two-state solution is just a total fallacy. You know, they want to go back to 1967 borders for a two-state solution. Well, what happened in 1967? Israel was constantly being attacked.
That's
so that's just a total, smoke screen, to have this two-state. So they don't want to, as you just read in that article, that the president of Iran, the Ayatollah, they don't want a two-state solution.
That's right.
It's from the river to the sea.
Right.
They want Israel eliminated. All the two-state solution is, the so-called two-state solution people talk about, is just a step, one more step to wiping out the Jewish people. And if the Jewish people give up the Golan Heights, if those who've been to Israel, they're finished.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. It's the total eradication of Israel, and that's what the Bible says. That's where the Bible says everything is headed. And the Antichrist will be Satan's final instrument to try to bring that to pass. But the good news is that ultimately God will deliver his people. They will be preserved, and God will fulfill his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and with his descendants. And so that's the good news. God's ultimately going to prevail in this, but it's going to be there's a lot of terrible things that are going to happen before we get to that point where God delivers Israel.
So Israel is in a major ground operation right now in Gaza. I think they've had 4,300 strikes in Gaza so far militarily, killed a lot of the terrorists. The Prime Minister Netanyahu has stated openly that when this is over, they're not giving control of this back to obviously Hamas or the Palestinian Authority, that Israel will occupy Gaza. I don't know if it's indefinitely, but this adds another dimension to the problem already. A two-state solution says that East Jerusalem, the West Bank, possibly the Golan Heights goes back to Syria. But a two-state solution just means they had already given up the Gaza. Now they're taking it back, is what Netanyahu is saying. Then you have East Jerusalem. What do you think the significance of that is, that Israel is taking control of Gaza?
Well, it's just going to continue. The outcry in the world is just going to become greater and greater against that. Because again, it's just going to reinforce this idea. Well, they're occupiers. They're the oppressors. Israel's been out of Gaza since 2006. They have their own government there. In fact, a friend of mine just sent me a picture, our guide in Israel, Ronnie Cohen, of the Golani Brigade inside the headquarters of Hamas in Gaza City. They've taken that. So they've taken all, but it's just going to increase this idea, that they're the oppressors. But Israel's been out of there since 2006. That they've had their own government. Yeah. Gaza, with all the money they've received, the three leaders of Hamas combined are worth $7 billion.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, the main two leaders are each worth $3 billion. The third in command is worth $2 billion. So the commanders of Hamas, the three leaders, are worth $7 billion. Where's all this money that's been going in there? Where's it been going to line their pockets? Gaza should be a resort. It ought to be like Qatar. It ought to be like these beautiful places in the Middle East. All the money that's flowing in there, they can do whatever they want there. But they have a venomous, satanically energized hatred for Israel that blinds them to everything else. But that's the problem when Israel, if Israel stays there and, occupies that area for some period of time, it's just going to reinforce this idea that Israel are occupiers, and it's just going to ratchet up even more the anti-Semitism in our world today, tragically. But they have to do that to protect themselves.
Yeah. Well, this is a no-win situation for Israel.
It's a no-win.
There's nothing they can do right in this situation. We're going to go to the subscriber-only portion of the program right now, but before we do that, let me tell you, Mark and I have our new book, What's Next? The Israel-Gaza War, connecting today's headlines to tomorrow's prophetic events. It's talking about what's happening right now in Israel and the Middle East and the prophetic implications. If you don't have a copy of this, go to Amazon.com and you can get a copy of this book right now. Let me also say, if this program has been a blessing to you, maybe even if you're a subscriber, I want you to give. I want you to consider helping us out financially. We're expanding as a ministry. We're trying to add new features and new people on the site. And so you can go to give.endtimes.com. You can give any size gift. No gift is too small. No gift is too large. And also you can give a recurring gift if you want to give every month or every quarter, whatever. You can make your gift a recurring gift. So go there right now if you haven't already. If you're not a subscriber, go to endtimes.com, $7 a month. We would love to have you become a subscriber so you can get everything we have, the full show, all of our podcasts, all of our articles, endtimes.com. If you are a subscriber, stay tuned. We're going to answer questions.